This is a spooky place to walk at night in the dark, but it gives you an idea of how old Edinburgh would have. So, because Edinburgh, the old town's built into a hillside, you've got these huge, what look like 4 or 5, 6-storey buildings on the front, but at the back side, not only are they 8 or 9 stories, but they're also 3 or 4 stories underground. So we're going to quickly pop into this building on the left. I'm hoping they haven't closed it early. It's supposed to be open for another 15 minutes. Quite well with COVID. Practically everybody over the age of 45 has had their 2 vaccinations so far. So come on, please be open. Please be open. It's open. Brilliant. School of Divinity. You'll see at the top it was built in 1846. It's also called the New College. And look at this for Harry Potter. So the School of Divinity, basically it's the head of the Church of Scotland, the General Assembly, and it's also part of the Edinburgh University. So you've got this statue here of John Knox. John Knox was largely responsible for the Protestant Reformation in 1559. He also went on to become the head of the St Giles Cathedral, which we'll see shortly, which is the most important church in Protestant Scotland, called the High Kirk. And there in the distance there is the skyscraper we've just walked under, to just show you how incredible these buildings are. Isn't it stunning? It really is like something from Harry Potter. I hate to say that because it sounds a bit cliched. So this is Protestant. It's not a church. It's basically a training facility, and also the place where they elect the head of the church, what's called a moderator, which they do every year. So it's an incredible place to visit, and you can see how it highlights the beautiful church steeple in the background. There is again John Knox. So let's go back the way we came. Gorgeous, absolutely stunning building. So we've got the new town in Edinburgh stretching out before us. I'm not going to go over because there's a load of people at the fence. I don't want to get them upset. The building directly ahead, you can just make out a green dome just beyond the trees. That is the Bank of Scotland, the headquarters of the Bank of Scotland. The Bank of Scotland, strangely, was founded by an Englishman, and the Bank of England was founded by a Scotsman. So I'm not quite sure why that is, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to pop to the right for a second, so I'm not filming people. And we're going to go up here, Milnes Court, which is where we've just come from. Beautiful building. So a lot of these buildings were saved from destruction. When they started to build the new town behind me in the 1800s, everyone who could afford to moved out of the old town. The wars were over. Scotland and England weren't at war anymore, so it was safer. You didn't need big city walls to protect you. The widow of the Lord Stair of Dalrymple, and she had a townhouse built here, which is this incredible building here, which takes her name, Lady Stair's Close. And it's that close and that big, I'm going to have to try and find somewhere else to stand to fit it all in. So today it is what's called the Writers' Museum. You've got this little plaque hanging up outside, and it's dedicated to 3 famous writers who spent time in Edinburgh. Robert Louis Stevenson, who was born in Edinburgh and spent most of his life here. Sir Walter Scott, who was also born in Edinburgh. And lastly, Robert Burns, Rabbie Burns, Scotland's famous poet, who stayed here on a few occasions, but he was actually, well, he lived all over. He was born in Alloway in Ayrshire, and he spent time in Dumfries, where he eventually died as well. And this was built in 1622. You can see above the door the initials and the date 1622. It's what's called a marriage lintel. So quite often when people got married, they would carve the initials in above the door. So the sun is going to kind of be coming into play, but we'll give it a go. It is beautiful. 1622. 1622. So this was built when Mary Queen of Scots' son James VI was the King of Scotland and of England. Except in England they called him James I. So I'm sorry if I'm missing any comments. I always find it difficult to walk and talk and look at the screen at the same time without falling over. And this little cross here, this is a more recent, this came about 3 years ago, and this is a little dedication to the Scottish war poets. There were a number of poets in World War I and World War II, and that is to commemorate them. So we'll turn around and give you another view. There we go. It's an absolutely gorgeous building, built in 1622. Lady Stairs House. Her husband was actually partly involved in the organising of the Glencoe massacre, and he had to resign from his job. And he was also involved in joining Scotland in union with England, although he died just before the documents were signed. Does it smell a certain way? It smells a lot of really good food actually, because there's a little restaurant just round the corner and I can smell all their cooking. So let's pop up this way. I'm just going to have to... So over on the far side we've got that yellow building. Just to the right of it we've got Brodie's Close, and that's named after Deacon Brodie. And Deacon Brodie was a famous character in Edinburgh. He's got a tavern here on the left hand side named after him. He was a man on the town council by day, but at night he was a professional thief. And everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked when he was found to be responsible for such terrible crimes. And he was the inspiration for Robert Louis Stevenson, Mr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or sorry, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because of his split personality. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Robert Louis Stevenson was born and lived in Edinburgh. This is a statue of David Hume, who was a philosopher. Everyone touches his toes in the hope that some of the wisdom rubs off. So Robert Louis Stevenson was a bit of a rogue. He famously wrote the book Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde after going on a several days long bender. And when he came to after a couple of days partying, I'm sure ladies were involved as well, he found that he'd written the book Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he read it over and then ended up burning it. And his publisher then turned up the next day and said that he'd read the book and loved it, and he had to write it again from memory, and he always felt that it wasn't as good as his first effort that he destroyed, but ultimately it became a bestseller. So I always get this one wrong. We've got this statue just outside. I'm going to say it's the 5th Duke of Buccleuch, but possibly it's the 4th, but then again it might be the 6th. Oh, I'm wrong again. Oh no, I'm not, I'm right. It's Walter Francis Montague Douglas Scott, the 5th Duke of Buccleuch. So the Dukes of Buccleuch are the wealthiest landowners in Scotland. Well, they used to be, they're now the 3rd wealthiest after the Queen and a man called Anders, who owns a clothing retail company. I forget the name. I forget, it's Anders Pov or something like that. So welcome to St Giles Cathedral. Montague, sorry, you're right, Montague. St Giles Cathedral. St Giles Cathedral was built around about 1100, 900 years old, give or take. And it's basically the centre of the Protestant church in Scotland. It was originally a Catholic cathedral, and after the Reformation it became a Protestant place of worship. It's got this beautiful carved door with all these wonderful statues. Some of them are former bishops, some of them are kings from history, and just over here, yet again, we've got on the right hand side, we've got John Knox. John Knox, who was a minister here after the Scottish Reformation. So over on the right hand side, we've got the French consulate, this building over here, beautiful building. Yeah, it's closed at the moment anyway. And this takes us round to what's called the Signet Library, because on the other side you'll see this little trackway through the cobbles. Don't know if you see that, it's almost like a path. And that's because this is the High Court. So if you've been a naughty boy or girl, you will end up over there in the High Court, and your defence counsel will probably be hanging around somewhere around here, and they will use that little pathway to get over to the court. And this is what's called West Parliament Square. So before the union with England in 1707, this is where Scotland's Parliament was. But as Robert Burns said, the nobility of Scotland sold their souls for English gold, such a parcel of rogues in a nation. And they ended up, Scotland voted, or the only people with votes in Scotland voted to join a union with England, when the people of Scotland didn't want it at all. It was highly unpopular. There were riots all over Scotland, every city. There were hundreds of dispositions sent to the Parliament by general people and general public trying to overturn it, and not one single vote from common man or woman that endorsed the idea. But originally, before this was a Scottish Parliament, this was a graveyard. This was a graveyard of St Giles. So underneath this car park there are literally thousands of burials that have just been tarmacked over. The only one with a marker is this one here, car park space number 23, and you're probably not going to be able to read it because the light's not very good, but this is the approximate burial spot of John Knox. John Knox, the Protestant reformer. This is where he was buried. That's his lasting testament. Car park number 23. And then this beautiful statue. This is the oldest lead equestrian statue in the United Kingdom. This is Charles II, who was the last monarch to be crowned in Scotland, 1651. After that, they were all crowned in Westminster in London, and they continue to be there even today. So Charles II, quite as fire chief at the time, a man called James Braidwood, and he set up the first ever fire service in the world, and he prevented this area from being destroyed during the Great Fire of Edinburgh. So this is a lasting statue to him, and public announcements can be made from it. So for example, the end of World War II, the birth of royals and so on. So you've got all the coats of arms around it. You've got Scotland there, the rampant lion, You've got the United Kingdom, which has got the unicorn on the left of Scotland and the lion of England. And then you've got the University of Edinburgh. You've got the district of Leith. You've got the district of the Canongate, and so on, all the way around it. So basically all the symbols of Edinburgh. This building over here, this was built to replace the Mercat Cross. This was built to be the Chamber of Commerce, effectively. And the locals who preferred to do their business outdoors over there at the Mercat Cross, they didn't like it. So it ended up becoming the city chambers. The city chambers. So this is the seat of Edinburgh City Council. And you've got this statue, which is of Alexander the Great and his horse, Eucephalus. And it is a beautiful building. When they built this, they had to dig down a lot to put in some serious foundations because of the size of the building. And they used the earth from here to create the esplanade at Edinburgh Castle, which is the area that soldiers would have originally done their drills on in the mornings. So city chambers. Tron Kirk on the right hand side. It's kind of been a bit of a problem for quite a long time. The bell tower caught fire quite a number of years back, and they had to rebuild it. And then the left hand side of the church used to be a lot bigger, but they knocked sometime around the 15 into the early 1600s. I've heard various different dates, but it's certainly somewhere in that time frame. And then we've got this little square feature in the middle of the road, which is another of the wellheads. So this would, again, water would have been piped down from the reservoir up at the castle by gravity in the days before water being able to be piped by the mains into the houses. It's a gorgeous building. It looks like they're digging up the road here as well. Up this little plaque. Let me see if I can get this to... Oh. Nope, there we go. You can see that up there. That is how it would have looked. So it was 4 towers with a central square tower and a gateway through the middle. But as I say, it was demolished. And the pub on the far side is called the World's End because this was the end of the world for a lot of people. Beyond this point was bandit country. Romantic. So over in the distance you'll see a beautiful big dome. That's an area of science and medicine in Edinburgh. So I'm just waiting on the traffic, which I'm just going to make it. And I haven't been knocked down yet. So here we go. Unfortunately, we're back in the sun. There's worse complaints to have. So this is Adam Smith. Oh, I can't even see it. It's so sunny. Let me get into the shade. So Adam Smith is sometimes called the father of economics. If you've heard of the wealth of nations or the term GDP, he coined all those phrases. Okay, great. These are back. I'm in the shade. So we're walking up the right hand side of, or the northern side of St Giles Cathedral. So back in the day, this area would have been covered with little wooden stalls called luckin booths. where people would have sold their wares. So they'd have sold keepsakes, religious keepsakes, food, etc., etc. And just up here as well, used to stand the old toll booth of Edinburgh. A toll booth is if you're a naughty boy or girl, that's where you will end up. And the statue of David Hume. So we're going to head up to, let me see, we're just coming up for 5 o'clock. We're going to head up towards the castle, Edinburgh Castle, and we'll take a little look from the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle. People spit on the Hart because there used to be a jail there set into the ground where people that were guilty and soon to be executed were kept prior to their trial or prior to their execution. So people used to spit on the prisoners in their subterranean cage. So even though the cage is long gone, people still spit on it as they walk past. This area here, this is Deacon's house, which is where Deacon Brodie used to. So he must be absolutely boiling with that hat on and that kilt on, because I know I am. So we're back at the hub. It's this beautiful church, and I'm going to stop talking for a second so you can hear the piper. To say the battery was getting low. Okay, hopefully you've returned. That was just my phone telling me my battery is getting low. So this beautiful building here is called the Witchery. It's one of the best restaurants in Edinburgh now. But this is where the witches were kept prior to their execution. That's the reason it's called the Witchery. Scottish whisky experience on the left. And this building on the right hand side, which has got quite an unusual shape, this is the old reservoir. This is now called the Tartan Weaving Mill. But this is where the water that supplied all of the cisterns all the way down the Royal Mile and into the Grassmarket, this is where the water used to collect, and then gravity supplied it all the way downhill, all the way down to Holyrood Palace, so for a mile, and into all the side streets as well. Today it's the Tartan Weaving Mill, and then we've got, so we're kind of back to where we began. Well, we're not really, because I can see where we began, which is over here. This building here, this is George Heriot's school. George Heriot was another jeweller and goldsmith, and he was a jeweller to the royal family. On his death in the 1600s, he bequeathed millions of pounds in today's money for a school for fatherless bairns, so children who were orphaned. And George Heriot's was built. No sooner was it completed than Oliver Cromwell invaded Scotland, and he used it as a place to stable horses and to keep a garrison of soldiers. But now it is a private school. It's one of the most expensive private schools in Edinburgh. Over in the distance you've got Arthur's Seat, which is another 350 million year old volcano, which is just a short walk from the city of Edinburgh. You can walk it in about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, if you're pretty unfit. And more importantly, the star of the show, Edinburgh Castle. Can't go too close because they're closing. On the left hand side is Robert the Bruce, King of Scots, and on the right hand side is William Wallace, another famous Scot. Above the archway there is a gold plaque, which is the rampant lion of Scotland, and above that is a crown. The blue sort of banner is in Latin, It says Nemo me impune lacessit, which means who dare meddle with me. So in other words, if you mess with me, I will mess right back at you. And that is Edinburgh Castle. And the Esplanade, which is where the Royal Military Tattoo is normally held, but it's been cancelled for the last 2 years. And originally it was the parade ground because Edinburgh Castle was a barracks. And then again, another view to, well, there we go, there's a date there, 1815. So he is interred in this grave. So he was a member of the Royal Scots Grey, and the Greys were a cavalry unit, so they were on horseback, and they were called dragoons, so they didn't actually fight on horseback time. We've got a statue of the Grand Old Duke of York. If you know the saying, he had 10,000 men. He was the second son of George III, and he was also commander of the British Army. And from what I understand, he was pretty useless at his job. And then another little statue there to various. This is the Scottish Horse Regiment. Greyfriars Bobby. So if anyone is interested, you can stick with me for 10 minutes. I need to go that way anyway, so I might as well just head down there, and then you've got an opportunity to see a little bit more. And you'll get to hear the bagpiper. So the tower on the left hand side with black and white on top, that is Camera Obscura. That's a sort of magical mirror tourist place, but it's interesting because it's actually the oldest tourist visitors centre in Edinburgh. I think it opened in the very early 1800s, if I remember rightly. So it's Edinburgh's very first ever tour. There's a little bit of a queue at Greyfriars Bobby, but Greyfriars Bobby, he's even got his own pub. So for anyone who doesn't know, Greyfriars Bobby was a dog. He was a dog, and his owner died, and he watched over his grave in the graveyard behind for, I think it was 12 years, and he became something of a celebrity. And at the time you had to have a licence to own a dog. So eventually the town council actually applied for custody of Greyfriars Bobby, and he lived to the age of 16. But as something of a celebrity, and also he got awarded the freedom of the city of Edinburgh, which also allowed him the right to vote. So Greyfriars Bobby had the right to vote when women didn't have the right to vote. So there you go, how's that for democracy? Right, I'll just quickly show you the statue. It's always busy here. Sorry, I'm back. So this is Greyfriars Bobby. People always give his nose a wee rub, which is apparently good luck, which is why it's gold. But Greyfriars Bobby. So he was a good dog, and he was also he's the reason it's called Greyfriars. You'll often see the Greyfriars, the Blackfriars, the Whitefriars, depending on if you were a Franciscan or an Augustinian or I can't remember the other ones. Back wall. There's been a church on this spot since I think the middle of the 1100s or the 1200s. Has not got to everyone who has left a gift or gave me a little tip. I don't ask for them, but obviously it's much appreciated. It'll help to pay for my parking, and I just appreciate everyone giving me a follow, giving me a like, and checking out some of my other videos. As I say, I'll keep walking down here. It's a really nice